An overrated Spongebob episodes list? Well, I'll give anything a shot, I guess. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what I just watched, but I do know it was not very good. So let's commentate on it. The first thing I wish to point out is Phantom Strider doesn't seem to really understand what overrated means. He says he's not putting Band Geeks on this list in his honorable mentions because of how much joy that episode has given people.
Even if it's a little overhyped, and I don't laugh at all of the jokes, Band Geeks has brought people too much happiness for me to add it to this overrated list.
But isn't that a little backwards? If something is bringing a lot of people a lot of joy, and you personally do not feel like it is as good as everybody else does, that seems like more incentive to put it on the overrated list, not less. He then goes on to say he's perfectly fine with it getting all the praise it does.
There's certainly plenty of love for this episode, and I think that's fine.
But aren't you fine with there being plenty of love for all of these episodes, given you begin this video with a disclaimer essentially saying exactly that?
And just a reminder, if you do like these episodes, I totally get it. Many of them are renowned as classics, and they're popular for a reason, even if I can't see it. This is just my silly personal opinion.
And that's not even getting into the times he doesn't really explain what other people think of the episode, meaning we don't have any basis of comparison for his own thoughts. For example, his number 9 choice is the sponge that could fly of all episodes.
And what's 9 on the spongy list? The sponge who could fly, aka the lost episode.
Which he says he would struggle to give a 5 out of 10.
Because I'd personally barely give this one a 5 out of 10.
But what does everybody else give it? That's the basis for it being on this list. Fuck, that's the basis for the very next line of your video.
Talk about overrated.
The only person whose opinion he mentions in this entire segment besides his own is, I guess, Patchy's, who he says really enjoyed it.
Even if I'm disappointed with it, Patchy is downright delighted with the episode. And honestly, I'm glad someone was.
But that's an incredibly silly reason, given Patchy's entire character is a hyperbolic caricature of a devoted Spongebob fan. So he's going to enjoy basically anything and everything that has Spongebob on it. Look, I'm not going to act like I have my finger on the pulse of the Spongebob community. However, whenever I hear Sponge That Could Fly get mentioned, it's usually just seen as a mediocre ratings trap, with some okay jokes. Not one of the best episodes of the classic seasons by any stretch of the imagination, and certainly not something many would argue with if you give it a 5 out of 10. For the record, most of the time Phantom uses IMDb scores as his basis for how loved an episode is. However, he didn't for the case of Sponge You Could Fly, because it has a score of 7.8 on IMDb, meaning most people felt it was perfectly okay. And if he mentioned this, he'd probably have to cut out this line about IMDb.
You know, sometimes I wonder if this website gives every season 1 to 3 SpongeBob episode an automatic 8 to 9 star rating, regardless of quality.
By the way, Sponge Who Could Fly isn't even the only season 1 through 3 SpongeBob episode that got less than 8 stars. Party Pooper Pants has a 7.7 out of 10, in fact. Another entry from this list, Season 8's Hello Bikini Bottom, only got a solid 7 stars on IMDb. Phantom doesn't mention its IMDb score, although he did find someone at the SpongeBob wiki who really liked it, I guess.
Some people really loved this episode, such as Thomas on Encyclopedia Spongebobia.
This episode is really funny, and the plot is good. This is my second favourite Season 8 episode, behind It's a SpongeBob Christmas, and one of my favourite episodes from the post-movie era, without a doubt. 10 out of 10. Happy face.
Yeah, I should note, showing random reviews is something Phantom does a lot, although credit where it's due, he does usually at least attempt to make the case they're representative of the community. And although I won't be showing the vast majority of them, there is one that I just could not believe when I first watched this video.
According to TV Guy 3,
This episode had some great gags, and the Blue Danube montage was great. 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. How?
They just told us how. Your audience just saw the part where this person explains how they came to that conclusion.
Oh, coffee fudge swirl with Reese's peanut butter cups. Oh, I wonder what's in that.
You just listed off all the ingredients. Everything you just said is what's in that.
Or how about this part where he says that one of the episodes he's putting on this list, that being the episode Valentine's Day, could have gotten its high score on IMDb because of its sister episode.
Like most classic episodes, it got a lot of very high ratings, such as a 9 out of 10 from Irate Cartoons, and an overall score of 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb, though perhaps most people gave that rating for the other episode Valentine's Day is paired with, The Paper, which is in my opinion, much better episode.
But if that's the case, again, it feels like you lack an adequate basis to call this episode overrated, especially given apparently a large chunk of your community doesn't like it, if them wanting it on your list is any indication, and according to you, quite a few reviewers called it mediocre.
My community suggested this one a lot, and I can definitely get why, while some reviewers did agree it was mediocre.
This isn't even the only time he uses community consensus as a reference for what is and isn't overrated, by the way. Regarding Jellyfish Jam, he says,
and it certainly has some naysayers, as this was one of the most recommended episodes by my community.
And later, Club Spongebob.
This one also got a lot of mentions in my community.
But isn't the fact that your community can come to a consensus about the episode's poor quality evidence it isn't actually overrated? For something to be overrated, the majority of people have to disagree with the statement that it's overrated, because otherwise it would just be negatively viewed by the population. He also seems to be under the impression that Club Spongebob is about Squidward attempting to question the wisdom of the magic conch shell, and the blind faith of SpongeBob and Patrick leading them to success or something.
I don't even like the main message, that mindless obedience and never questioning magic superstition will lead to success. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, and I realize it's played for laughs at the ridiculousness of it, but I guess I just didn't find it funny. And it was just annoying seeing Squidward punished for not mindlessly believing.
But Squidward wasn't punished just for not blindly believing the magic conch, he was punished for being a dick. There's a difference between, for example, not praying for water during a drought and making fun of people who do. The second of which being what Squidward was actually doing. For example, just before the food literally falls out of the sky, Squidward tells them,
As if the answers to all your problems will fall right out of the sky. Fall right out of the sky.
I should note that after this, Strider says,
yeah, technically being lost is his fault for accidentally catapulting them into the wilderness, but that doesn't mean I want to see him starving to death and suffering the whole episode.
There was nothing technical about it. It was just Squidward. Honestly, half the time it feels like Phantom Strider didn't even watch the episodes he's criticizing. Take this complaint regarding the sponge that could fly as another example.
And I have no idea what is wrong with the townsfolk in this episode. They mock Spongy continually for attempting to fly. Why?
Because they view the idea of a sponge flying as inherently ridiculous. Sponges are not flying creatures. Therefore, SpongeBob's dream of flying is, in the mind of the townspeople, him essentially dreaming of going against reality itself. Valentine's Day is another episode it seems like Phantom Strider just didn't get. He goes on about what a jerk Patrick is for wanting this big gift from SpongeBob.
The whole thing is basically about a misunderstanding between SpongeBob and Patrick. SpongeBob's big chocolate gift to Patrick is late, And Patrick becomes increasingly violent as he thinks SpongeBob only got him a handshake. Surprising no one, Patrick turns out to be a very materialistic, selfish starfish. This is an early season episode, and we can kind of see here that Patrick was a bad apple from the start. Look at Patrick here. He's being an awful friend. We see this constant build-up of resentment from Patrick, and it doesn't really serve as being funny or unexpected. It's just weak and cringy. Personally, I wouldn't care if my friends got me a handshake on Valentine's Day. I'd probably laugh. At least they remembered me on Valentine's Day. That's nice of them to remember me. This is one of the first times we see Patrick in that notorious jerk Patrick mode. He causes chaos and havoc among the carnival upon the tiniest change in his mood. It's one of the first points I started to say, hey, this Patrick guy is kind of annoying. I wonder why SpongeBob hangs out with him at all.
However, Phantom Strider leaves out a very important part, and that is why Patrick was so angry that he only got a handshake. It wasn't just because of that alone, but it was because, first, SpongeBob hyped up his gift to Patrick quite a bit.
And I have a present for you.
You do?
It's the greatest, the bestest, the most fantabulous present ever! But you can't have it yet.
And because, as we see later in that same episode, SpongeBob got gifts for everybody in town, including somebody he had literally met that morning, but appeared to have not really gotten a present for his best friend.
Really, it's the thought that counts.
SpongeBob, I just wanted to thank you for this box of chocolates.
No problem, Fran.
I mean, even though I was expecting more.
Thanks for the roses, SpongeBob. Happy Valentine's Day.
You too, Dave.
And not that it matters that we've been friends for so
Hey,
long.
SpongeBob, thanks for the bike. Can you believe this guy? I just met him this morning.
Anyway, here are a bunch of errors I noticed.
To get them to quieten down long enough for him to actually have a chance to sell the house, he convinces Spongy and Patrick it's opposite day.
Actually, he only convinced SpongeBob of that. It was him who then told Patrick it was opposite day. Small nitpick, I know, but it still bothered me.
As a kid, probably the part I disliked the most was watching SpongeBob screw up Squidward's desperate attempt to move. Squidward isn't hurting SpongeBob and Patrick here. All he did was tell him it's opposite day. He's just trying his very best to sell his house and move somewhere more peaceful.
The fact that he is actually lying to them by making up a holiday that does not exist apparently doesn't count as hurting them to Phantom Strider. Nor does he recognize the fact that it was this very lie which caused the events that led to this opportunity being ruined for Squidward in the first place.
But probably what bugs me the most is the end scene. It's just weird. Finally, after all those years of Spongy nagging him, Squidward finally joins in on a game with SpongeBob and Patrick.
Looks like it's time for Plan B.
What Plan B? Where was the Plan B? Honestly, I have no idea what happened here. Because in the next scene, SpongeBob and Patrick have ditched Squidward to just go inside, leaving him half mad in the freezing cold. Like, what the hell, SpongeBob? That's your plan B? It just feels like a jerk move. You've waited so long to have your friend Squidward join in on a game, and you just ditch him when he finally joins?
Phantom, did you watch the same episode I did? Because, while yes, it did begin with SpongeBob wanting Squidward to join in on their snowball fight, that ended rather quickly as neither SpongeBob nor Patrick wanted to snowball fight. Squidward wanted them to continue, though, for his own entertainment, and tried to convince them to continue because of that.
That shtick comes from the bully Kevin being a one-note jerk to SpongeBob, and SpongeBob blindly likes him anyway for some reason.
I mean, all my life I wanted to be a jelly spotter, and now I'm out here with you guys with the nets and the jars and the jellyfish, and I'm with Kevin, and Kevin's with me.
That's about all we get. You see, Kevin is from the Jelly Spotters, and SpongeBob loves the Jelly Spotters.
For the record, I didn't edit anything there. Phantom Strider went from going, for some reason, SpongeBob likes Kevin, implying the episode doesn't really explain why that is, to a clip of SpongeBob saying that he's wanted to be a part of Kevin's group, the Jelly Spotters, for his entire life. followed up with him quite literally saying why it is that SpongeBob likes Kevin so much.
And honestly, the final joke I didn't even understand. SpongeBob produces a giant bubble pie to save the day from a giant jellyfish. And I'm like, what? Even by SpongeBob standards, what kind of random, incoherent nonsense is that?
You could even call it nautical nonsense if you would like. Also, there is a logic to it. SpongeBob himself directly explains it by saying,
Ah! Everybody loves pie!
92% of Americans enjoy pie, in fact, meaning that SpongeBob was making a pretty safe bet.
To me, this episode felt like an uncomfortable retread of Atlantis Square Pantis.
For those curious, no, Phantom Strider never really elaborates on how Hello Bikini Bottom and Atlantis Square Pantis are similar, making one wonder what the point of saying such a thing even was. The most we get is him derogatorily calling Atlantis Square Pantis' songs more coherent, I guess?
The story starts with an immediate long line of awkward sing-talking from the characters. Somehow, they're even less coherent than Atlantis Square Pantis songs.
But that doesn't equal it being a retread. That's just not what a retread is. That would imply they're doing the same things they did in Atlantis Square Pantis. A claim that, again, Phantom Strider never really justifies. Anyway, final thoughts. This list was just bad all around, and it constantly felt like Phantom had barely watched the episodes he was talking about, or was leaving out key details in order to make them look worse than they actually are. Good night, and good luck.